r/AskReddit. Students of Reddit, what was the reason for why one of your teachers had a breakdown during class? I have a couple. First, 9th grade. Strict math teacher. Focused on order and form much more than clarity of thought and content. I particularly hated that we had to draw margins onto every single page. I told my dad. I probably skewed the story when I did so. My dad sent an email. She read it while she was giving a class, not my class. I was told about it. She burst into tears as she read the father of a student telling her how incompetent she was. Second, 11th grade. Douchy students. I had already left the school when this happened, but there are multiple accounts on this day's events. Students in a science class realize they struck gold in a hellhole, Mentos and a diet soft drink. They plan it out. A student will pop a Mentos and drink the soda. He'll act as if he's having seizure. When the teacher acts, the rest of the class will follow suit. The time comes. The sole student stands up and asks to go to the bathroom. As he's saying that, his mouth starts foaming. He falls to the ground. The teacher grabs the phone to call the infirmary. Nothing. The charming students have disconnected the phone. The teacher yells no. No. The rest of the students are shocked. They realize the teacher is frightened. They just stare at each other. Nobody else is foaming and having seizures. It's just one foamy salmon splashing around in the ground. The teacher's eyes scan the crime scene. Her hands can't decide what to do, as if having macabre seizures on their own. Two of my classmates look at each other. They nod and smirk. They pop the Coke and Mentos into their mouths. The students around them do the same. A wave of foam takes over. The whole room is foaming. It's no longer a tragic scene where a desperate teacher is flailing around seeking to help the dying students. It's brighter. My classmates' foaming smiles emit the sense of levity, of happiness, and of a joke meant to brighten up the otherwise serious nature of academic life. The teacher rises to the laughter. Her eyes are wide open, trying to decipher what these foamy smiles could mean. They played a joke on her. She thought she was holding a dying body. She thought she was alone in saving a helpless student. And it was all a lie. She held her hands up to her face and sobbed. The laughter stopped. Sobs and foam. That's all my classmates heard. For what seemed like an eternity, the bell rang. Students elsewhere in the building flooded the hallways. Not in this class. Students didn't know what to do. My sources tell me nobody consoled her. Students quietly left the class as a standing woman mourned the dignity and sense of safety she had lost. Oh, this might get buried, but there were two teachers that just fucking lost it in my 4 years of high school. Freshman year I had history class with this well-known teacher that was not well liked. She was forced to change her curriculum twice because it was too much, but I'm preparing you for college. Legit made the class 2 years previous watch CNN or some other news channel. Is there an economic financial channel? 3x a week for 90 minutes and take notes. Anyways, I had her class last period and I was always basically late. I was in the basement on the other side of the school and her class was on sea level at the very end of a hall. I had 3 minutes. So I walk in, late with a few other people from that class, and like usual everyone is talking. I sit down and notice in huge writing something about teach when you're quiet or something like that. Needless to say, about 10 minutes before the end of class she flips shit screaming about how we don't care about our education and we are ungrateful, and how we are all failing the assignment that she set for today, which she never handed out. Then the quietest, most timid student ever, who had spent the time reading the whole time, raises her hand and is met with what? The student was like, technically you can't fail us for an assignment that none of us 20 students have ever been in possession of, or was aware of. I swear I could hear my blood pumping, it was so quiet. The teacher proceeds to lose it again, so much so that the teacher next door comes in and dismisses us, which just pissed her off even more. We all left very confused. The next day it was business as usual. Junior year. Remember the teacher who had to calm down my history teacher? She taught honors/app English. I had her for honors 10. She was harsh. So she encounters a student who wants to be that kid. The one who is super intelligent and all the teachers praise for basically r/I am Verismith type shit. So this girl writes this 8-page long paper basically tearing apart teachers' teaching style and curriculum, saying how it wasn't advanced at all and how 6th graders should be able to read/do this work. What we didn't know at the time, I only witnessed the last half, is that she was mid-divorce with a cheating husband. So after the girl hands the paper in, with what intentions I'll never know, the teacher grades it accordingly. She failed her. It wasn't the assignment. End of story. Well, the student flips out, basically pointing out how her paper was more superb than the assignment, and the teacher loses it. I walked in to grab a friend's instrument, trumpet, that they left behind, and I witnessed her flip. Basically the teacher called the student a narcissist, and that her condescending tone was not acceptable, and that her tactics to brown nose the teachers were no better than her ex-husband's flowers. All you do is try to gaslight your way out of everything and play the victim. It's me every time, and your little essay won't make up for the fact that you're stuck in a remedial life of being normal. IDK how long I stood there with a fucking trumpet in my hand, but I'm sure I caught a few flies with my mouth open. I slowly backed out of the classroom and immediately told everyone what happened. The best part? Said student was a sophomore and placed in senior app English. She failed both semesters because she couldn't cut it. She almost didn't graduate because that was not the last time she pulled a stunt like that with assignments. 12th grade math and English. So our math teacher was pregnant and was out for most of the school year, so we had a long-term substitute. It's near the end of the year, like 2 weeks left. We are working on our in-class project that we hadn't learned about yet. We had no clue what to do, so we asked for the sub to explain. He tells us he doesn't know how to do it. We tell him to use the teacher's guide textbook. He says he can't find it, so we just started trying to find it on our own in the textbook and online. A bunch of us were using our phone, and he hates when students pull them out. He stood up, slapped the desk, slammed the textbook shut, and was yelling at us to put away our fucking phones, because the next person he sees with it out will have it taken until the end of class. No one really listened, and he noticed, so he took a dry erase marker and wrote "fuck you all" on the board in huge letters, threw the marker at the back wall, stormed out, flipped a table, and broke the window to the teacher's lounge. We never saw him again after that, and the assistant principal was forced to teach us for the remaining days, and honestly she did a better attempting to teach and help students than he did. English teacher was extremely religious. Like everything she would do or say would be followed by something about God or Jesus or a Bible verse. She was a firm believer in abstaining from any sexual contact besides a hug and holding hands until marriage. So over the course of a week we started to fuck with her. I was one of 6 couples in the class, and we all decided it would be funny to see her reaction if we started out with just a kiss, and each day got progressively farther. The last day, the day she snapped, we were making out, feeling each other up, and would have so sit on our laps and we'd reach under their shirts and grab their boobs or put our hand down their pants. She ended up grabbing out 2 Bibles, 4 things of holy water, and a cross. She held the cross and prayed, then she read some verses of the Bible to herself with the other Bible and cross on her forehead. She eventually took the holy water and cross and splashed all of us in holy water while reciting some prayer or something to remove evil spirits from people as she held the cross out, and finished it by screaming, "The power of Christ compels you." We all started laughing at her and she snapped. She threw the cross on the ground and threw a Bible at the whiteboard. She yelled at us, "What is wrong with all you sick devilish people? You're all gonna burn in hell for this, and I'm gonna be in heaven because I'm not a fucking sinner." She then stormed out of the room screaming Bible verses to herself again, and when one of the other teachers saw this, they called up school security and she was told to sit in a chair and collect herself. She told him we were having sex in the classroom, which was a lie, and all 35 students said so. She was eventually taken to a mental hospital to get psychiatric care. Yeah, what we did was wrong, but it was so funny seeing her recite Bible verses, throwing holy water, and yelling "Power of Christ compels you." The 12 of us were suspended for a week. It was worth being suspended. 4 stories have to change little details to make them non-traceable. One pupil committed suicide. He was 16 to 18. Our lead teacher knew the pupil personally and had liked him very much. Her breaking down was quite surprising as she was an old grumpy hag who liked to change test tasks while we were writing them, for example, was racist towards foreign pupils and suspected everyone in her class if anything bad happened, and also looked like a damn wrinkly bulldog. She never liked us, we never liked her, but we all had empathy with her when she was sad about it anyway. Basic human respect. Kid in 5th grade died on a class trip. They decided to drive onto the road with their bikes to cross it faster. Female teacher who supervised was devastated because one kid died. Was horrible. To my extent of knowledge, not controllable by her and not her fault. Still sad about that story thinking about it. Teacher was quite authoritarian, like teacher in first story, but showed how vulnerable she was and how much she cared about the kids when she died. Again, a female teacher, but I really liked her, who was divorced and had 3 to 6 disabled kids. Why they hadn't stopped making kids after the second one? Don't ask me. She really cared for her kids though, drove them to school, to physical therapy etc, and really worked hard to teach us in class in a friendly but strict manner. One day, she came in, dragged her trolley with her to her place in the front like usual, took her documents out, and stared at them for a moment. Tears started to build up in her eyes and her shoulders started to shiver or rock up and down as she started to cry. Looking from my perspective of a pupil in the class, the mass, the collective, she seemed so alone in the front and so sad and desperate. We were shocked at first, not knowing what was going on, and kinda shocked of course as we weren't used to this. A teacher, a person of authority, showing so much vulnerability, humanity, and pain. After a few seconds passed, some girl asked her what had happened. Teacher pulled herself together a bit and told class that one of her kids, who she was always driving to another school before teaching at ours because wheelchair, died in the night for a reason I can't remember. Probably failure of breathing muscles or something. We spent the rest of the time we had to comfort her. She took a week or so off, but came back later. She looked like a lesbian, short hair, skinny and everything, and was damn fighter for sure, you bet. Nice woman. Felt bad for her. Memory will be burned in my brain for some time. Another female teacher asked in Christian religion class what stereotypes or prejudices we have about people of other religions. Goal was to educate us about other religions and teach tolerance towards them, especially Muslims. Teacher was known to be mentally unstable, build near the water and kinda dumb. One of the kids in school had the same weed dealer as her, but that's another story. However, we say some mild stuff, but then the round of questions came to a boy who we knew as someone who is pretty blatant, direct, and especially didn't like that teacher. Boy did he go off. He went on to list every single prejudice I had heard of to that day about Muslims and more, without actively identifying with them of course. Teacher's eyes fill up with tears as pupil continues to speak. Finally bursts out, "How can you think horrible things like that?" Proceeds to bawl and bolt out of the classroom. Class is kinda stunned, and some people are burying their face in the palms of their hands, because predictable. Some chuckling, because dude played a really bad joke on her and she overreacted, because she is sensitive to that. No verdict on either side from me about that story. This one cool guy, let's call him Dave, tormented our English teacher for no reason. She was very sweet and passionate about her job, but this guy was a dick. He would write things on the board before class really small in random spots like witch, pig and just other random insults. The one day that caused the breakdown was when he stole the remote for the wall-mounted TV. Her class was the time period that had the daily announcements, so the TV was heavily used. So she searched for the remote, couldn't find it, and had to stand on her tiptoes to control the TV from the button on the front. A little bit through the announcements the TV turns off. Everyone's reaction was weird, so teacher got back up to turn the TV on again. A minute or so later went off again. Of course at that point it starts getting suspicious, and she jokes, "Okay, is someone playing a prank on me?" No one says anything, because no one knew Dave had the remote. He repeats turning it off 2 more times directly after she turned it back on, and she snapped, "Okay, who has the remote? Who is doing this?" And being immature 9th graders we all start snickering, cause that shit's funny. After no one fessed up, she starts unloading about how she been having a tough time lately and starts spewing out all this information about her personal life, just ranting away. And during the middle of her rant, Dave turns the TV on and starts flipping through the channels. The teacher lets out her animalistic yell and burst into tears. Cue entire class with shocked Pikachu face. She throws the classroom door open and runs out. She was gone for like 20 minutes and returns with the JROTC teacher. Literal hard as steel drill sergeant. He was calmly talking to us how what we were doing as a class was shitty to her and the perp needs to step forward, and fucking Dave had the balls to turn the TV off and on. Dead silence. You could have heard dust falling on the ground and everyone was like, we're dead. At this point someone who knew he took it quietly pointed at Dave. The drill instructor goes over to him and literally pulls him up out of his desk by his shirt collar and screams in his face, "Do you have the fucking remote?" Feet dangling off of the ground. His whole arm was shaking as he took the remote out of his pocket and showed it. His ass was grass now. He was swiftly removed from the class by the drill instructor and teacher, while we all sat there for the rest of the class doing nothing until the bell rang. I had this angry teacher in 6th grade. She had been teaching kindergarten for like 20 years before this and somehow got put into 6th grade. Clearly, this was not a great idea. She didn't exactly teach us the skills we needed to learn that year, as this was a school where that was the last year of elementary. We didn't learn so many building blocks for the next year that are basically standard. Instead, we learned about pet conservation, which is cool, admittedly, a few words in German, and made a news station in class. Now, the news thing was cool. I can still say the woman makes bread in German, and I was already a pet lover, but when I moved on to 7th grade, I was for the first time in my life a little behind in math. There was also a kid in our class who was really nice, but very quiet. Being unobservant 6th graders, we didn't really notice that he didn't have much of a wardrobe and wore much of the same things. I did see him once when I was at the beach running from one trash can to the next, collecting cans, but I didn't think much of it as a lot of people collected and returned. Again, nearsighted and self-absorbed kids we were. She was a mean and cranky teacher. She liked me, but I cringed every time she barked at other students for ridiculous things. We were filling out a map, and she had placed colored pencils on the table, and this nice surfer boy in my class was kind of careless about the lines, because he was used to erasing the overlap after. These didn't erase, and she berated him loudly in front of everyone. She had a punishment box that we had to shake out a cube from when we got in trouble, and then reference the number on the cube to these index cards she had on a ring above the chalkboard. Things like copy a sentence 100x and things like that. It was not great, and she was, as I said, cranky and growly. One day, towards the last third of the school year, we were probably being boisterous. We couldn't settle down, and chit chat and giggles kept tittering around the class. There was no malice. No one was laughing at her, and it wasn't over the top by any means. I've been in those classes, and this was not the situation. She lost her ever-loving mind. She started shouting at everyone. She berated the class for their disrespect, for how difficult we made the class, for all of the transgressions we had committed. She started pointing people out. She pointed out the surfer kid for always thinking everything was a joke and never taking anything seriously. She berated another girl for never paying attention. And then, she pointed at the boy from the beach. She said "and you," and then proceeded to tell the entire class how his mom had passed away and his dad remarried to a woman who already had kids. The dad didn't take care of my classmate anymore and only bought things for his new kids. My classmate had worn the same clothes multiple times, so she had pulled the dad aside and had a serious talk with him to get him to take care of my classmate. We were completely shell-shocked. My classmate's face had paled, and he fled the classroom in tears. She had started crying mid-rant a while ago and ended up storming out to go cry to the principal. We just sat in stunned silence until he came in to scold us for driving such a hard-working teacher to tears. All I remember is how mean she was. It was never, if rarely, directed at me, but I can feel second-hand shame and cringe for my friends and classmates who had to endure that. I saw her years later walking into a Walmart, and I hid. No, thank you. Side note, my classmate entered a Mother's Day poetry contest in the local paper and won a cash prize. He bought himself a whole new wardrobe. I remember him wearing his new Simpsons shirt with pride. I'm pretty late here, but everything happened in high school my senior year. It was October, and my friends and I were all waiting by our lockers for homeroom. Now, about 20 minutes before homeroom we heard an announcement that all the teachers had to go to the office. Weird, but alright. We continued talking, and some kids started streaming into their rooms. Suddenly, we watched the teachers all walk back to their classrooms with the worst looks imaginable. The halls went quiet when we saw that. Then the senior class was called into the auditorium. Oh shit. We are only ever called in here to get bitched at. Unfortunately, not today. We walked into a room filled with random people we didn't know. Found out they were counselors, a dog. We only ever had drug dogs walk the halls, but this dog definitely wasn't a drug dog, and the admin of the school and many of the senior teachers. That's when we were told a student had been in a car accident the night before. Our class was about 100 students, so most of us at least knew or were close with the kid. This kid was pretty well liked, so our class and school took it pretty hard. We were an all-boys school, so that made it even weirder. It's the only time I've seen 100 plus boys in silence. His closest friends were the first to break down student-wise, for obvious reasons, followed by the kids he did lacrosse and swim buddies with, helping mentally challenged kids learn to swim. The rest of us were just trying to support them throughout the day. My physics teacher was the worst one to see break down. Everyone hates this guy. He'd been teaching 40 something years at the school and had such a pompous attitude that almost nobody liked him. While starting to teach, he started to write something on the board. The expo marker literally stopped mid-equation and simply streaked down the board. He just literally stopped mid-lesson and stood at the board for a good 4 minutes staring at it. He just dismissed class and walked down to the counselors. My English teacher was literally the kindest soul on the planet. This kid was in her class, so it was quite tough for everyone. She knew she wasn't going to make it through class, so she had tissues ready. When reading, she looked up from Beowulf to tell the class something about the setting. She just looked straight at his seat and started bawling her eyes out. After a minute or two, a few of us walked up and hugged her. It's all we could think to do. Almost every teacher had some sort of reaction though. My Spanish teacher simply spoke in English, something she never did in her classes. It simply didn't happen. My geometry teacher from sophomore year simply shut down. He was already someone who talked to themselves and mumbled, but this was different. He literally just shut his door for the day and didn't even let students in for classes. Campus ministry was a wreck with students and teachers who didn't know where else to go. Every practice and after school activity was cancelled, and we all just kind of sat in the cafeteria talking about our own things. We held a little memorial service for him the next day. The rest of the classes had heard about it already down the grapevine. We even left his spot for graduation, and his parents walked up to receive his diploma. We learned that he managed to call his dad, but his dad couldn't pick up because he was in a meeting. He worked nights. The dad has a voicemail of his son gurgling and crying out for his parents. I think he did say he loves them though. 1. Third grade teacher. Wasn't our fault at all. She was apparently dealing with severe mental health problems that were not diagnosed at that point. She was what you'd call a crazy bitch. She'd scream on top of her lungs whenever someone answered a question wrong. She'd get you in trouble if you failed your test. She'd make you stand in front of the class and ask the other kids to laugh at you if you asked to go to the bathroom. She'd go on her knees and stare you right in the eyes if you asked a question that she deemed too stupid to answer. One day, my best friend and I were in line to get her to correct our grammar books. She suddenly stood up and took this poor little guy by the arm and pushed him right in the door. He went hard enough to break a panel of the door. She went outside the class probably to see if someone heard something, and we closed the door. Third graders can actually be smart sometime, because we had the reflex to put her chair in front of the door handle so she couldn't get back in the class. She began screaming and crying outside the door and punching the glass on top of the door. If she was mad enough, she'd sit under her deck. All we knew was that a couple minutes later, the principal came into the classroom and told us the teacher wouldn't be back for the day and that he'd stay with us until he'd find someone else. She wasn't back for a couple years. 2. First year of HS. We had a Spanish class. Our teacher, who was a wonderful old man, got to retire mid-year during Christmas break. January comes and we hear we'd get a new substitute teacher until they find a new Spanish teacher for the school. First class comes and the sub teacher is late. Somehow, the class decided it was the right time to put the desks down on both sides of the class and do a paper airplane / paper ball / anything goes fight. Sub gets in about 10 minutes late. It's pure chaos in the classroom. School supplies, dictionaries, books, paper airplanes, and everything you could possibly find in a classroom is flying everywhere. She tried to get us to calm down, but to no avail. She got smacked in the face by a pencil case and she just left. We never saw her again. There was, later that day, an announcement on the school radio. Our entire class was asked to go to detention during lunch break. The teacher never came back to the school, and we had to take the hour of class we missed during our lunch break. The very next day they had found a very cool lady to teach Spanish to us, and we never caused her any trouble. To this day, almost 15 years later, she is still there, and she remember us, and how fucking scared shitless she was to enter her first classroom to face us. I was the teacher in this one. It was kind of a Lord of the Flies moment. I was teaching in Vietnam, 1st and 2nd grade. Classes were between 40 to 60 kids. I had a teaching assistant, Ta, who would translate complicated directions for activities and would help keep the class in line. One week, my Ta informs me that she won't be coming because she's getting married, but she didn't want to tell the school and forfeit her pay. She was getting a couple dollars an hour, and I guess she didn't get leave time, which meant no substitute. It would have been fine, but for this one class from the Black Lagoon, I'd always had discipline issues with this group, so I knew it would be a challenge. But I completely underestimated it. This was a bigger group, over 50, and when I walked in, I wasn't even able to get them to sit in their seats. I realized that they were feeding off my agitation. One started mocking my saying sit down, and then around 15 parrots chimed in, so I decided I'd go ahead and start the lesson and hope they'd join in. I'm writing on the board when suddenly I hear the undiagnosed autistic boy start screaming bloody murder. I rush over, and I figure out that one of the kids has converted his stackable lead pencil into a blow dart and has shot the kid in the neck with a sharp lead. So I try to put him in timeout in the back corner, and chaos erupts around me. Everyone except one sweet little girl is up and running around. Then a girl walks up and hands me my phone. I look at the desk and realize that someone has stolen my purse and distributed the contents, wallet, residence permit, keys, etc. to various people throughout the classroom. So I'm panicking, trying to collect my belongings and maintain some semblance of order. And while I'm trying to get my wallet back, keep in mind, I don't speak Vietnamese, and these kids speak very basic English, mostly individual words, like blow or coconut, or phrases like hello teacher. I'm happy. Someone drags me to the back of the room, where the orphan boy is standing in front of a pool of blood. I ask him where it came from, and he points at his mouth and makes a coughing sound. So, didn't have time to figure it out, because I realize that the kid who should be in timeout is bullying some girls. Try to mitigate that, and as I'm scolding him, which to him is just unintelligible blather, someone runs up behind me and punches me hard in the spine. I turn around to see who it was, and the kid who was in trouble just runs away. Like, he leaves the classroom. I ran into the hall to try to stop him, but he ducked into the bathrooms or something. I was so upset and angry about the chaos around me that I snapped. He finally came back, and honestly I just started screaming at the kid until I was hoarse. It was either scream or cry. I managed to gather most of what had been in my purse, although I never recovered a couple of documents, plus a textbook, and had to replace them. Fortunately not my residence permit though. The class finally ended, and mercifully it was the last period before lunch, and I went to the teacher's room and sobbed through my lunch break. Finished the day with 3 perfectly pleasant classes, but had a much harder time psycheing myself up to teach there after that. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe the channel.